Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Utopia show. Today, I am your host, Faria, and today we are going to speak on the topic the art of starting over. Now, first take a breath with me, inhale, and let it go. Wherever you're listening from right now, in your room, on a walk, in a car, or maybe sitting with a quiet kind of ache, I'm glad you're here. The episode is for anyone who is in the middle of something they didn't see coming, for anyone who had to let go of something that they loved, for anyone who's been brought to their knees by change and is now quietly, bravely beginning again. Today's episode is called The Art of Starting Over. Now, it's not the Instagram version, not the new year, new me version, but the real version. The kind that comes after endings you didn't plan and before end beginnings you don't yet understand. So get comfortable and, well, let's begin with it. Starting over often begins in a moment you didn't choose. A breakup, a job loss, a friendship that went quiet. Sometimes it's more internal, a dream that died, a version of yourself you don't recognize anymore, a life that doesn't fit. And here's the thing, endings rarely arrive with clarity. They rarely arrive with clarity, okay? More often, they arrive as confusion, as stillness, as a slow undoing. Sometimes they show us as a whisper. This isn't working anymore. That's what we hear sometimes. You try to ignore it, you try to salvage what's broken, but eventually life makes the decision for you. The house of cards fall. The denial wears thin, and there you are, standing in the wreckage of what once. It's okay to not feel ready, it's okay to feel afraid. But here's something no one tells you, endings are not failures, they're invitations. They are a chance to pause, to reassess, to come home to yourself. But before, you have to face the grief first. One thing is that, you know, endings are not failures, and it's okay to feel confused about something. Now, grief is not just for funerals or anything like that. Grief is for the version of your life you thought you would have, for the people who didn't stay, for the should haves and almost and wasn't meant to be's. When you start over, grief follows, and it's often invisible. People don't see it. They don't send flowers when you leave a toxic job. They don't throw ceremonies when you end a friendship or walk away from a dream, but you feel it in the quiet moments, in the first without them, in the spaces you once filled with hope and love that now echo with uncertainty. Let yourself grieve without rushing, without judging. Grief isn't a weakness, okay? It's not any sort of weakness. It's a proof that you loved, that you tried your best, that you believed in yourself. And when you let grief move through you without numbing, avoiding, or silencing it, or without feeling guilty of facing grief, you make room for something new. Now, here's the thing, you know, it's okay to feel like it's okay to feel something like that. It is important for you to feel grief, to move on to the next phase of your life. And so, no one talks about the in betweens of the phase that we're facing, the starting of the new something and the ending of something. The in betweens, no one is speaking about that. So, the part after the ending but before the new beginning, the liminal space, the space where no one is present for you, the space where you actually have to deal with yourself, the desert, the fog, the rain, where you cannot exactly figure out things, where you are just confused by yourself. So this is where most people want to give up, but because it's sort of disorienting. You don't know who you are anymore. You don't know what comes next. You might be feeling a bit scared, but everything that used to define you, your roles, your routines, your friendships or relationships, everything is gone. So you feel unrooted, or maybe like unseen, maybe even invisible. But here's the truth: the in between where is where you rebuild it. This is the phase where you are building yourself once again. You're rebranding yourself, you're restarting yourself, you're getting back on the track. And now, not at all, not all at once. Okay, you can't just build yourself all at once in a day because you think you can. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It happens moment by moment, tiny habit by tiny, moment by moment, one honest thought at a time, one thing at a time. Okay, this is where your soul gets quiet enough to listen, where you stop performing and start feeling, where you learn to be with yourself once again. Now, don't rush this part. It's sacred, it's lonely, but it's fertile. It's empty, but it's full of possibility. And in this stillness, something starts to whisper. You're not lost, you're becoming. That's what you hear. That's something that starts to whisper. You know, because you're not giving up in between, the in between phase. You're still stuck to it by yourself, and that is so much more important, and you need to appreciate yourself for that. You are restarting everything, you're rebranding yourself once again. This is the phase which is so important for you to move on. Now, when you start over, fear is gonna show up very loudly, probably, or it might just like show up very quietly inside you. The fear might just whisper, ask something like that. What if I fail again? What will people think? What if this is the wrong choice? What if I'm too late? It's okay. Let fear speak. Then say, then reply to those questions. Then just say it. Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm gonna follow my dreams anyway. I'm gonna restart and rebuild myself anyway. Fear isn't a stop sign, it's a signal. It's a signal that means that you're about to grow. It means you're walking into something real. You don't need to be, you know, scared. You just need to be brave enough to keep on growing. Even if your voice shakes, even if you cry on the way there, even if you have no idea what's on the other phase of your life. you know fear fear is something that will come and it'll go, but you don't need to doubt yourself once again. You don't need to question your goals once more, and think about, oh, is this where I'm going? Is this the right path? Is this where how everything is going to turn out? Well, obviously you cannot keep on doubting yourself, questioning yourself of things that you do not have control over. You do have control over the actions, but you cannot have the control of what is going to happen in your future. So it's important for you to focus on the things that you could actually control. Now, starting over, brings up old regrets, old wounds, old mistakes. You may find yourself replaying scenes in your head. Why didn't I do it sooner? How did I not see it? Why didn't I spot that mistake? Why wasn't I stronger? You would question yourself those, the old mistakes. You would try, it would keep on repeating in your head, replaying the scenes in your head. But then stop. You should stop, please, and then take a deep breath. Well, apparently you did your best you could, with what you knew at the time. You did what you could. Maybe the 15-year-old did what she could do. Maybe the 16-year-old is now going to learn from whatever you actually um, learned, right? And that's what is very important. So you were surviving, you were loving, you were hoping, you're allowed to forgive yourself, you're allowed to grow beyond who you were, you were allowed to restart everything, and now you're not broken. Okay, just because you are replaying those old mistakes, scenes in your head, doesn't mean you're broken. You're just healing, and you're not behind. You're rebuilding your life. You're doing it once again, and you're allowed to change. You're allowed to begin again, and it's okay, guys. It, it's important to realize, maybe like think about those mistakes, but you do not need to think about those mistakes and keep on replaying them on your in your mind. It's important for you to move on. So starting over, it's not about erasing your past. It's about reclaiming the pen. It's asking, what do I want now? What do I want now? What am I becoming? What do I value now that I've been through all of this? You stop living for others. You stop chasing approval. You stop chasing people's validation. You start listening inward, and what you hear is different this time. It's totally different, okay? Now, you might even move a bit slower. You might say no more often. You might laugh less loudly but laugh more deeply. That's growth. That's clarity. You're not here to repeat a life that didn't fit. You're here to create one that reflects who you are, who you really are. And that's what is it is more important than anything else. And the thing is, you cannot you cannot change your past, but what you could possibly do is focus on the actions that you do in the present moment, so that at least your future, you obviously you do not have control over your future, but you could at least have some control over some 1% of control over your future by the actions you do in the present moment. And that is important. You need to make room for improvement. You need to make room for self improvement. You need to make a room for your space, for yourself, a space where you could restart once again. Now, you know you might even like laugh less loudly but laugh more deeply, and that's growth and that's clarity. As I said, you're not here to repeat a life that didn't fit. You're here to create one that truly reflects who you are. Now, here's what no one tells you: starting over doesn't make you weaker. It makes you who you are. It makes you real. It makes you a person. It makes you a human being, and that's more important than anything else. You learn what matters. You learn who shows up. You learn how strong you are when everything else falls away. You become someone softer, wiser, a bit wiser. You become someone who doesn't need perfection, but only peace. You become someone who doesn't need to prove anything, but only live honestly. Starting over is not something to feel ashamed of. It is your path. It is where you're gonna go to, right? And you are not at the end. You are just getting started. You're getting restarted with your life, and that's so much more important than anything else. And the thing is, you would obviously, if I were to give you some examples, obviously you might be worried about what people are gonna say, um, what the society is gonna think of. But unfortunately, no one really cares of what you're doing. The people who would be thinking of or thinking about you, um, they might just not be there for you. You know, the people who kind of keeps on judging you for restarting, they might not always be there for you. So it's important for you, for you to focus on yourself. And life has a way of surprising us with a lot of things. Sometimes it's a loss, or maybe like an unexpected turn of events that leaves us feeling stuck. So whatever the case, starting over isn't just about picking up the pieces. It's about transforming those pieces into something new and something like really beautiful about yourself. The art of starting over, you know, what to do when starting over is all you do, and it's the time to start over. make a new beginning. That's what you need to focus on. And starting over isn't the end of the road, it's a chance to build a brand new life. It's a new chance to build something different, to build a life that really, really fits your needs, your wants. You know, you're not a life where you're not confused, or a friendship where you do not where, or maybe building a friendship where you do not confuse yourself with anything else, where you do not question your capabilities or abilities or your own intelligence. You know, the hardest choice that you could, this quote, the hardest choice that I ever made was starting over again. This is a quote that I read on Google in one of the blogs that I was um, reading. Now, starting over, it takes a whole lot of different approaches, which is your focus away from dwelling on those characteristics and behaviors that sort of limits you and redirects you towards recognizing your strengths, your own moral values, your strengths from which you can realize your potential. It's more about changing from your past version to a very new version. The new version has a different set of moral values, a different set of boundaries, different set of goals in their life. Maybe it's the same goal, but maybe the new version is taking a different approach that maybe she haven't thought about it. The new version of yourself is someone who is starting to um you know s- making sure that they learn from their own mistakes, from their previous own mistakes, and they do not make it again, do not make the same mistakes again. Now this shift in focus is important. You simply do what you care about, and that is so much more important than anything else. The art of starting over, it's all about to begin something new, to begin a task, to begin a career hunting job, or maybe rebuilding our life, overcoming the natural tendencies of things like laziness and procrastination. It emphasizes the importance of, taking that one step towards achieving your goals rather than being hindered by fear or hesitation. Now, it, it this art is starting over. For some of us, it could be our first time to start over. For somebody, it could be the second, or maybe it could be the third time, or maybe the fourth or the sixth time. It could be any of the chances, any time. But at the end of the day, it's a chance to become exactly who and what you've always wanted to do. Just because something hasn't worked out doesn't mean you're destined to fail. It doesn't mean it will never happen. So take time to reflect and figure out your next move. And start wherever you are and start small no matter what happens. That is one quote that I read. And the greatest gains, however, come from the small steps of change you make each day. Take one step at a time and you will be on your way to success. Now, the art of starting over, it is altogether a whole you kind of enter a different era, and that's something so different than what people usually think of. It's something where that era is something you're not afraid of, you're not scared of. So if you're here in the middle of the storm, the quiet, the rebuilding, let me tell you this: you're not failing, you're transforming. You're not late, you're exactly on time. You're not weak, you're courageous beyond belief. The art of starting over is not just about survival, It's about choosing to believe that you still have some beautiful thing ahead of your life, ahead in your future, even if you can't see it yet. So it's important for you to keep going, to keep breathing, to keep writing your story, because this moment right here, this moment right here, now, is where everything begins. And it is important for you to realize the moments that you have in your life. We talked about the grief, we talked about in between, we talked about the fear in our life, right? We talked about all of those things. But at the end of the day, it's the art of starting over. It takes you to a different era, to a different phase of yours. And that is something you really need to be proud of. And so, thank you for being here with me today. If this episode found you at the right time, I hope you carry these words with you like a lighthouse. Something to come back to when the days feel heavy or the road feels unclear. And if you love this, feel free to share it with someone else who's starting over too, because we all need reminders sometimes. Endings are not failures, and beginnings don't need permission. Take care of yourself, and until next time, keep becoming. And well, don't forget to follow me on my Instagram, which is Faria's Utopia. And obviously, thank you so much for being here. I'm super grateful for everybody who's here. And thank you so much for listening to this episode till this moment, till this period. you know, just remember whatever I said in that episode. Focus on on growing once again, on rebranding yourself. You know, rebuilding your life once again to rebuild your future once again. Do it. So yeah, thank you so much.